that means that I'll just see that it actually says that the recording has started. You're recording, yes, perfect. So now I am recording and I'll go inside of InDesign. On a separate screen, I actually have this content that the design guide is going to contain. I have that on a separate screen so I can always see what pages we need in our design manual. First of all, to create a design manual, we'll create a new document. So I'll just create a new document. And most likely this design manual will most often be shown on screen. So there's a high likeliness that I'll actually choose to create this for web. Some people choose to create their design manual for print, but more often nowadays people actually show their design manual on web. You send it on a PDF so the rest of your company's employees can see the design manual. So it would be most likely created for web. But it's really, if you feel this is most often going to be used for print, then of course just make it for print. I'm going to choose an A4 size because by doing so, I can always elect to later on print this and it will be in A4 format. Of course, when I'm creating for web, the pre-flight options will be set to 72 ppi. So you should, if you want it to be high quality images for print, you should consider that when putting in the images to this document. It will be landscape format because I'm expecting it to be viewed on screen. So that's typically landscape format. It's really not a good idea when we're basically always seeing it on screen if you choose portrait format, because you should take advantage of the size of the screen so you can just have a design manual that fits the screen. So I would say I would recommend using landscape format if this is created mainly for screens. And you can always print it later on and it still looks nice when it's in landscape format. Okay, so you don't have to worry about the pixel dimensions right here. But if you like to see it in other dimensions, you can always change the units out here. So you can see what that actually is in centimeters. But I'm just going to keep it in pixels. Okay, so there's some margins down here. If I have no clue what 36 pixel margins is, I could again change it to centimeters so I have an idea of what the margins are going to be. And perhaps I wanted it to be, I don't know, margins of 5 centimeters. I don't know. Doesn't really matter. There's no specifics for how the margins are supposed to look. Just know that you can change the units up here so it makes more sense to you. Of course, we're not going to use bleed. That makes no sense if this is created for web. So I'm going to just stick with this and click create. So let's do that. Okay, so these margins were proportionally perhaps too big because it's 5 from the top, 5 from the bottom, and so I'm just using a lot of the format just for margins. And there's a reason why I did that. That's because just to show you, if you ever decide to change the margins, again, you can always do that in layout. In the menu called layout, margins and columns, you can change it up here. I would normally, instead of doing it in a layout on my generic first page, I would actually go to my master page and do it. That way I guarantee that I'm not just changing one page, but all pages. So to go to your master pages, and I have no idea how much you've worked with master pages. It's probably not been a lot, but some of you have probably worked a bit with master pages. Some of you are like, what the f is master pages? So, but to go to your master pages, you simply open your pages panel and you double click on your A master page icon. And one way you can always see that you're located on your master page compared to your regular page is actually by just creating more pages. So I'm gonna create 1 or 2 more pages. Down here you can see if I create more pages, they will come in they will flow like page 1, 2, 3. But if you're located on your A master, you'll see that no matter how much you zoom out, there will always only be one page. So that's the difference. You can easily see if you're located on your master pages or if you're located on your regular pages. What is a master page? It's a template that sends information down to your regular pages. So so if I draw anything on this page, it will send that information down to the regular pages, right? You can see now the square that I drew up here is located on each and every one of these pages down here. So a master page is a template for your regular pages in the document, for your document pages. I'm just going to delete this because what we're going to change is the margins. I'm going to zoom in again. I know some of this is going pretty fast, but that's because I'm recording it now, and I'll share the recording with you afterwards so you can do the same steps. Okay, so the layout here, if I change this on my master page, it will change on all my document pages down here. So I'm just going to change the layout, margins and columns, and I'm going to change this to be perhaps, I don't know, I could actually just write 2 centimeters in here, and it will write what 2 centimeters is in pixels. And I think that looks more correct for my document. And I'm going to click OK. So like I said, you can actually also write, let's say 15 millimeters, that's mm. You could write centimeters. You know, you can, the abbreviations of these different types of units. So, but I'm thinking I'll stick with that I'll stick with 20 millimeters or 2 centimeters, and just click OK. So now this should be changed for each and every page in my document. You'll see that all these pages now changed the margins and layout. If I had only one page selected and I changed the layout, margins and columns, it would only change on that one specific page. So that's one of the reasons that you should do this on your master. Okay, so the next part is actually to have a good procedure for how you use your layers. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click to create 3 more layers. So we have 4 layers all in all. So on this one called layer number 1, I'm going to double click it and I'll change it to header and footer, which is going to have mainly my master page items. Whereas these other layers is mainly going to have my specific items for each and every page. Some items will also be located on the master page for these layer 2, 3, and 4. I'm going to name my layer 2 background. This is stuff that's going to be located mainly in the background. For example, it could be some kind of texture or a background color or whatever. Something that will always be located behind the text and behind the pictures. Third off, I'm going to rename my layer 3. I'm going to rename that to text or typography or whatever you feel is correct for describing your text layer. And I'm going to rename the last one pictures, or actually I'm going to write images or graphic. It could be graphic. The great part about using the word graphic is that it both implies that it could be vector graphics and pixel graphics. Whereas if you write images, some people will say, well, does it include vector as well then? So if you write graphics, then you'll know that it's both regular images and vector graphics. Okay, so these are normally the 4 layers that I would have in any document, at least that contains several pages. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is perhaps start creating some headers, and know that what I'm going to create now is entirely random, but it will be some kind of generic layout that will be used for my design manual. So I'll go to always remember when creating this design that we're designing the template on the master page. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go straight to my master page by double clicking it. And then when inside of my master page, I'll just zoom in a bit. Whoops. I'll start creating these different bars. So I'll create perhaps a bar at the top. I'm gonna use the rectangle tool for that, and I'm just gonna click and drag a rectangle up here. And right now it's set to contain black, and could be any color. I'll just use some kind of swatch. And actually, let's say that I would like this company uses, let's say, orange as a general color for the company. So I'm just gonna change this swatch from not being RGB red, but to being orange. And the way you create new swatches in InDesign is simply by going to the burger menu, clicking new color swatch, and then simply changing the value right here. And to get a very fruity orange, you simply just pull the green slider so it's approximately in the middle. And so you can decide to name it with color value, or you can just call it my orange swatch. And I'll click OK. And one specific thing that's also very nice about swatches is you can share swatches with others by simply just loading swatches. So if you ever want to save these swatches, you created your own swatches, you simply click Save Swatches, and it saves as an InDesign document actually. Then if you later want to use the same swatches from that document, you can just load from that InDesign document, and then you get all these colors over here. So that's a very nice way of making sure that if you've saved a lot of colors, you can actually load them later on. Especially if you have a company that uses a lot of InDesign document, then it's very nice that you can simply just load all of these colors. Okay, so like I said, these are supposed to be, my header and footer are supposed to be located in the layer that is at the bottom. And I'll just make another rectangle down here. I'm not saying this is how it's in general should look for any design guide. I've included a few design guides in the files for today, so you can see example of how others are doing it. So if we should in general talk about generic layout, I'll just show you a few examples of that. You see, this is, for example, for how the design manual for UCN looked back in 2015. So there's like a generic, for example, a header up here. You see that the header never changes its look. It changes simply what it says inside of the top. So there are some generic things that always are the same. And if we look at, for example, Aalborg Kommune's general look, there are also some items that are always there. For example, this part where it says logo, that is always stationary, and there's some part down here that never moves as well. So it's very normal that there are some generic parts that never move. Likewise here, you see it's more like the frame never moves right here. So there are some generic parts that never move, which we call header and footer. Yes, okay. So perhaps there's supposed to be some text as well on this header right here. So I'm just gonna make a text box and just write something down up here. Let's just call this important header. We can call it chapter. That seems more logical. And I'm just gonna put it out on the left. I'm not worrying about formatting right now, so I'm just gonna select something random inside of the program. So let's say this is a Futura in size 30, and this is probably gonna look better in white, but of course always think about what is the corporate colors, what are the colors that the company is using. So if the company uses green and blue all the time, you should not make an orange design guide, right? Make the design guide so it matches the visual identity of the company. I hope that makes sense to you. So I'm just gonna choose this to be white. Okay, so down here, I would actually also like perhaps automatic page numbering. So I'm just gonna, and this is normally mainly done in design guides that are made for print. But let's just get the exercise of actually seeing how do we, oh my God, I forgot to sign out of Facebook. Fantastic. So that's part of the recording as well. Okay, so down here I want some automatic page numbering down here at the bottom. So I'm just gonna write a number. I'm actually normally I write 1, 2, 3 because if it's a long, let's say, magazine or design guide that I'm creating, I want at least there to be room enough for 999 pages. Because in InDesign, if you make a text box that is too small, it will throw the text out of the box and it will just show a red plus indicating there's not enough room. I can just show you that. And I think I'll use Century Gothic for my font. It doesn't really matter what font you're using. But see here, if you make the font too big, it will simply just jump out of the text box and there will be this red marker indicating there's not enough room for the text inside of the text box. So I'll just make sure that it is a proper size. And actually, to be sure that it's centered along the horizontal axis, I can right-click my text box and simply choose text frame options. That's Command B, Control B on a Mac. And I'll simply click text frame options and choose for it to be aligned to the center. If we check preview, you'll see that then it jumps down and it centers itself exactly between the top and the bottom. That's a neat trick for making sure that it's located at where you want it. And I'll just put it to be located on the right, like that. Yes, and seems logical to use white here as well. Okay, so how do I make this automatic numbering? Because right now, if I go to pages 1, 2, and 3, it simply just says this is page 123 on each and one of these pages. So in order to have it say the exact correct information of what page number this is, I can go to my master page. There's actually a shortcut for automatic numbering. It's let's see if I recall, Shift, Option, Command, N, I think. Let's see if I remember it correct. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my text. I'm going to use my cursor and just select the text down here. And I'll go into Type, Insert Special Character. And in here you'll find markers where you can choose the one called current page number. And I remembered correctly. As you can see, Option Shift Command N. Holy moly. Okay, so when I click that, it's gonna write A, unless you actually went down to one of the document pages and set automatic page numbering. You need to do it on a master page, right? So when you do this on the master page, and you always go to the master page just by simply double clicking it. So when you go to the master page and you make automatic page numbering, it will write A. And the reason why it writes A is because you're located on your A master. If you had created more master pages than one, for example, a B master, it would instead write B. And that's basically just to tell you that it's based on whatever properties is located on the A master. So this is not an A. This is not A for automatic. This is A for based on the properties of the A master. So if I had, I can just show you new master. Let's say a B master. If I try to make automatic page numbering here, 1, 2, 3. Actually, I'm just going to copy paste. That's going to be much easier. So I'm just going to copy paste on my B master, And I'm just going to make it black so I can see what it says. Boom, 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 boom. You'll notice that when it's located on my B master, it says B instead. So this is what it's, the properties, which properties it's taking info from. And in this case, it's taking info from the B master. In the other case, it's taking info from the A master. So it's not A for automatic. That's basically just what I'm saying. I'm going to delete this this B master again. So we're back to the A master. And if I did everything correct, it will actually say now that everything is located in the header footer layer. So I'm just going to try selecting everything, and I can see that only the layer called header footer is highlighted. Thus, only material is located in that specific layer. Okay, so perhaps I wanted there to be some kind of background texture as well. I'm just going to show you this for show, because in most design manuals there are no backgrounds, but in some there will be. For example, it could be a shade of gray in the background, just so it's not plain white paper-ish. So perhaps I would have a black with a tint of 10%, so it's kind of like more corporate-y. I don't know if that's a word. And you notice that before I actually drew that with my rectangle tool, I went to the layer called background. This layer, most likely, if I'm not going to create anything else background ever, I would probably lock that, because this is the only item that will ever be created on that layer. So I'm going to lock that because just because a background normally fills out everything. So by accident, I could easily start moving it because it's everywhere on my screen. So I'm going to log it. But one thing that's great about master pages is actually that anything that comes from the master page down to the document page is actually automatically logged. So if I click down to my page number 1, 2, and 3, you'll notice that everything is locked. I'm clicking on my mouse now, click, 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 click. Everything is locked. And some of you perhaps will feel that that's annoying, because perhaps you wanted to change some properties on page number 1. And to change properties on one page, you could either, because they're locked, you could either hold down Shift, Command, on a PC, that's Shift, Control, and then click the object using your move tool. Whoops. Am I clicking the wrong button? What? Oh. Shift command. One sec. Oh, caught by my own trap. I locked the layer, so of course I cannot. Okay, sorry guys. Of course, in order to be able to unlock this, I need to have unlocked the layer. Otherwise, there's no way I can get a hold of that. So Shift Command, click on the item, and then it's unlocked, right? Okay. So that means if I want my first page, and most likely I want my first page to look different, I need to unlock these objects by Shift Command, clicking on them, and simply just removing them. But there's also an easier way of doing this. So I'm just going to click Undo. Another way you can actually unlock all the items at once on a document page is actually just by right-clicking the document page and just hitting the area where it says Override all master page items. Then it unlocks everything, and you can simply start moving it as you want to. Yes. Okay. Another way you can actually detach page number 1 from being connected to the A master, because perhaps you don't want any of this graphic from the A master on your page number 1, because page number 1 is a front page. So the front page may look totally different than everything else. A way you can detach it from your A master is actually just by going to your none page and simply dragging the none page down onto page number 1. And that makes it a blank page where nothing is located on. Okay, so you could also actually have designed a separate master page for the front page, because perhaps the front page had some properties that some of the other pages inside of the design guide also have. Well, then perhaps you have a master for front page and end page-ish pages. So let's say, okay, I'm just going to simulate that. So actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my A master and just right click on top of the A master, or right click on top of the icon of the A master and simply just choose new master. You can do that from the burger menu as well. I'm going to choose new master. I could base it on my A master. That means it just becomes a copy of the A master, and if I ever change anything on the A master, that will be changed on the B master as well. I'm not going to base it on, because that's going to be too complicated within this limited time that we have. So I'm just going to make it a new master that's not based on anything. I'm going to click OK, and I'm just going to go to my A master to steal this one header and this one text box. So I'm going to steal those two and just paste them down in my B master. And down here, I'm simply just going to drag this all the way down. I want an orange page, and I'm probably going to locate this somewhere in here. Call this front page. Okay, and then I'll base my page number 1 on my B master instead of the A master. And that way, when I go to my page number 1, you'll notice that that looks entirely different than anything else. I would say in general, there's no reason to make a master page for one page, for your front page. That's simply just extra work. If your master is not helping you, then there's no point in making a master. But my A master, the one that I created right now, will help me a lot, because there's already a lot of predefined objects put into this page. Okay, so another thing is, if I want you see now that there's automatic page numbering. If I want my automatic page numbering not to start on page 2, but I want page 2 to actually say it's page number 1, you can go to page number 2 over here, page number 2 right here, and then you can simply right click it, and then you can choose the one called numbering and section options. And here you can just say start page numbering at 1, and then OK. OK. So now it says on page number 2 that it's actually page number 1. Notice though that over here in the page panel, it will say page 1, 2. So it's actually because you've started a new section which starts all over with page number 1, 2, and 3, and so on. So this could also be, perhaps I wanted my automatic page numbering to start first on page number 5. Well, then you can just do that by right clicking on page 5 and then going to numbering and section options and choosing it right here, start page numbering at. And you can actually write anything here. You can write that it's supposed to start at, call this page number 11 instead. You can also have it, instead of numbers, you could have it say ABC, Roman numerals and so on. So there's a lot of different things to choose from right here. Okay, so of course, next off, it would be logical on your master page to have created a text layer. So, sorry, not a text layer, but a text box, and that will be located on your text layer. So I'll just create a text box right here. And I hate using green. I hate light green layers inside of InDesign because it's very hard to see on the screen. So sometimes I just double click my layer and choose for it to become another color. It's much easier to see if it's dark green, for example. So yeah, perhaps I'll just choose dark green instead. And perhaps there are some generic settings to my text layer that I want. I'll right click to go into text frame options. And in my text frame options, I want there to be some specific margin down before it actually starts here. So instead of having done that in my layout, margins and columns, I'm actually going to do that in my inset spacing. So that's inside of text frame options. You can be located on any text box, just right click and choose text frame options. And okay, I've clicked on preview and perhaps I'll try writing 5 millimeters, and you'll notice that then it shows that the text starts 5 millimeters down. And you can also just click, these up and down arrows. There's no point of it starting differently from the left or right, so I'm just gonna unchain these values and I'll make sure that left and right are just set to 0. Yeah, perhaps 20 pixels is fine, and I'll just do that from top and bottom. I'll click OK, and thus we have our text box right here. I'm just going to right click and fill it with placeholder text, just so you can see how it would look on that page. And perhaps I want there to be some generic setup to the text. Perhaps I want it to be divided in columns. I could right click, choose text frame options, and say I need this to be in 4 columns. And I need there to be some gutter spacing between each column, and so on and so on. So perhaps this is my generic setup for the design manual. Perhaps I want it to be 1 small column and then 1 broad column. If I wanted to be more specifically customized text boxes, I would instead just I'll just click it to be 1 column, and I'll just go in to this text box and simply choose a size for this text box. And the easiest way to make sure that this size makes sense is actually just to go into my width up here, make sure that it's unchained, because otherwise I will change the height as well. I'll change it from the left reference point. Otherwise, it will start, if it was set to the right reference point, it will change the size of the box to grow smaller in this direction. So I'm going to change the reference point to be left. So when I change the width, it's going to change in this direction. Whoops. So how do I do this? I simply just go to my width up here. After having changed the reference point to left, I'm going to write a front slash, skråstreg. And then this is the division symbol. This is the symbol for dividing. And I'm going to divide it with, let's say it's thirds. I'm going to divide it with 3, so it becomes 1/3. That means this is proportionally 1/3 of this margin area. Okay, so if I actually unlocked this accidentally earlier, so I can just go to my, I'm still working on my master page, sorry. So I'm just gonna lock this so I don't move it accidentally. Instead of locking the entire layer, I'm just gonna lock the rectangle inside of the layer, so I can still use the layer and put stuff inside of the layer. I'm gonna go back to my text layer. Just gonna make a copy of this actually, and just move it over here and drag it the rest of the way. That's gonna be 2/3. This is gonna be 2/3. Of course, it would be logical to have some kind of gutter right here, so I could just simply hold down Command and click B, text frame options. That's right clicking text frame options, or just using Command B or Control B if you're on a PC. Okay, so I want this instead to have a left indent of, let's say, I don't know, 10 pixels. And likewise, if I wanted it to be equal on both sides, I could right click this and choose text frame options and say on the right we need 10 pixels. That way it's going to have the same, proportionality on both of these boxes. Most likely wouldn't want text in here. I would most likely want visual examples instead. So this could actually be more like images. If you look in any design guide, you'll notice that there is typically some text out on the left, and then there's a lot of visual examples out on the right. I'm not saying that it's like this all the time, but in a lot of examples of design manuals, you'll notice that there's typically text on the left and visual examples on the right, demonstrations on the right of how this looks in images and visuals. So it's very typical in a design manual that you have some info text describing the rules and whatever that defines the elements inside of your design manual. And on the right, it's very typical that you have images. So actually what I'm going to do now is I'm going to delete all the text inside of this box. And of course, then it didn't make sense that I made this insert left. So I'm just going to remove that again. So I would like to change this actually to being an image, to being a place where you can insert images. So I'm gonna, after having removed all the text from this box, and it's very important that I remove all the text, because otherwise when I right click, I won't be able to change the content to being images. But if I removed all the text, I can right click it and then I can choose content and then choose that content to be graphic. And that way, I simply change my text box to being an image box or graphic box. Having done that, it's much more logical to move that up into my graphics layer. Now you can see it's blue, so the images will be located on this layer. Perhaps you have a generic layout that says that we're going to have 4 boxes next to each other with 4 different examples. Well, then perhaps you'll want a specific setup for those boxes. And instead of actually dragging this box up here and then making 3 more copies, I could also simply do it a bit different. So I'm actually gonna delete this, and then I'm gonna use my rectangle frame tool, and I'm gonna click from my left top corner downwards. I'm still located on the graphics layer, and I'll just click, I'll drag it all the way down here, then I'll click up once, and I'll click right once. And then you'll notice actually that it creates some rectangles, actually 4 different image rectangles. There is a gutter between these already. If I did not want that gutter, I'll just try this again, and I'll just click once up, once to the right. And if I want to change the width of the gutter, I can hold down Command, that's Control on a PC, and click my left or right arrow for the vertical gaps, and I could change the horizontal gaps with the up and down arrows. That's again while holding Command on a PC, that's Control, and simply clicking my right, left, top, bottom arrows, up and down arrows. And you'll notice then I have 4 image boxes without gutters. So it really depends on what I need. You could actually also set these picture boxes to have a generic setting for how images are located inside of them. While all of these 4 boxes are present, are activated, are selected, I can right click and choose fitting. You can always clear the frame fitting options if there are some wrong settings in here, but I'll just choose frame fitting options. And here, inside here, you can actually choose for it to fit the content, the images you put in, to the frame. That makes it unproportional. Fit content proportionally. That makes sure that everything inside of the image is seen. There's nothing that goes outside of the frame. Or fill frame proportionally. and normally it's either fit content proportionally. That makes some white space inside of the box because it makes sure that everything is seen of the picture, whereas fill frame proportionally makes sure that the image is proportional, but some of it might go outside the image boundary. But fit content to frame is typically very bad because that just stretches your image out of proportion. So it will normally be fit content proportionally or fill frame proportionally. That way, when you put images in, they will automatically be rescaled to fit the image rectangle. I'll typically honor the image and choose fit content proportionally, but it actually looks better when you choose fill frame proportionally, because then the image box is filled in its entirety. But some of the picture will be outside of the frame. Sorry. Yes, okay, so this could be my generic layout for my design manual. Of course, I would also have some paragraph styles for header, subheader, and body text. So I could just quickly do this. I'm just gonna very quickly, this is going to be super speed, and I'm not considering errors or anything like that. So I'm gonna say that Futura is this should of course be in the corporate fonts that is being used. So in my case, my company would be using Futura Medium for its header. So let's say this is header. I'm gonna call this new go to the burger menu of my paragraph styles. If you cannot find these styles, they're located inside of window, inside of the one called styles. There you'll find what is known as paragraph styles. Okay, so I'll dub this header, and I'll just make a subheader as well. Actually, a header would be bigger. So let's say this is size 28. I'm gonna right click, 28. Then I'm gonna right click my header down here, and I'll just say redefine style, boop, so it updates, because it was set to actually only be point size 12, so you can always update if you make changes to it by just right clicking and choosing redefine style. Okay, so I'm gonna have, let's say, a subheader down here. This is gonna be, Century Gothic. And it's gonna be point size 20. New paragraph style, and we'll call that subheader. Boom, and just click down on subheader, and then the rest of the text, I'm just gonna make that, oh, by the way, if you have text going outside your text box, just go to edit, and choose edit in story editor. Then you can actually see all the text that's going outside the text box. That's a lot of text. I'm just gonna delete everything here because it's just ipsum lorem text. Of course, if this was an article, a genuine article, you shouldn't just delete all the text inside. So that's edit in story editor. And I'll make this into Optima, which is a quite slim font, very aesthetic. So let's just make sure that there's nothing going outside the text box. And I'll, of course, be sure that everything is selected so it becomes the new paragraph style. And this is body text. Well, there is some kind of logic in me using 28, 20, then perhaps 12. And Optima is a relatively slim font, so perhaps size 12 is fine. Normally size 12 is a bit too much in my world, especially if it's something like Arial or Helvetica. But Optima is quite slim, so size 12, I would say that's okay. And then I'll make sure that it is body text. I could, of course, just have done this when I was inside of it, by clicking Apply Style to Selection. Yes, okay, I know there's a lot of information in a very short time, but this will be a video in a short while, so you can always just click pause in order to see these things. But I think now we have the generic layout for a design guide. So what would be the normal things to have inside of this design guide? Well, first of all, when you click to create new pages, notice that all of them looks like this. So that's very nice if this was your general layout. You don't have to use time on actually making them look identical. So it's very easy to go in on let's say page number 1 and just start designing how that's supposed to look. And okay, so the next thing we're going to look at is actually what is supposed to be contained inside of the design guide. So I have on my screen next to me the typical things that are located inside of a design guide, and I'm just going to write that on page number 1. So on page number 1, the typical thing you would have, sorry, on page number 2, because page number 1 is already made, that's front page. And normally you would make something that looks better than just writing front page. This is the front page of your design guide. It needs to look nice. But the next page would typically be, for example, a title page where it says who is the author of this, who made this, and you know, perhaps there could be a preface, you know, some information about the history of the company and whatnot. But one of the typical things that you will see in large design manuals is tables of content. So that could be very logical. And I was a bit too quick and actually deleted the header formatting, but luckily I have them out here in my paragraph style, so I'll just click header, so it changes. So a typical thing to have right after your front page could be a table of content. I'm not saying that it's always like that. Often there could be, let's say, some history of the company, something, you know, some first words from the communication executive of the company, blah, blah, blah. So there could be a lot of introductory items before we have the table of content. Notice that small design guides don't have tables of content typically, whereas big design manuals or medium size design guides perhaps most likely have table of content. Okay, so the next item I could have would be it could be you know, a tone of voice. I'm not sure how much you've worked with tone of voice before, but often some companies include a tone of voice inside of their design guide, just in order for people reading it to understand what is the general way we speak to our customers and clients and so on in this company. Is it in a fun manner? Is it in a serious manner? And so on. So a tone of voice could also be included. It depends on the company. So let's just say that after the table of content, we start with the actual important content that a visual identity always includes. So that would be the logical place to start, would be logo. So I'll just change that to be header text. So there will be a lot of pages about the logo. And you've talked with Iris about this already. I've given some examples in this PDF file I included to you. It could be the logo in its natural state. That's always included. Logo variants, logo color variants, logo where you see how white space and text wrap is being used. That's the clear space rules. So you can always see how the logo is placed compared to other elements. It could be trademarks as variants of the logo for different products within the company. It could be payoffs, you know, slogans, which could be located with the logo. For example, with Nike, Nike has their own slogan, and you know, Coca-Cola has their own slogan, often located next to the logo. So that's also called a payoff. payoff. You can see that in the PDF file I gave to you. And there could also be examples of how you use the logo next to color, text, and super graphic, and examples of right and wrong. So there could be a lot of different things spread out over several pages. The logo part is often one of those that takes out most pages in the visual identity. So if you look in the design manuals that I included in the files for today, you'll notice that there are a huge chunk of the visual identity, the design guide, is actually about the logo itself. And of course, up here, I would make sure that it says logo. And notice that I'm just unlocking these elements. And when you try this at home, you won't be able to just unlock these elements. Remember, because they are coming from the master page, because they're sent down from the master page to the document page, you need to unlock them. So if I need to put some pictures in here, I cannot just click them. I can't just click them. I need to Shift Command click them in order to unlock them. So you need to do that with all of these items. And there's actually a reason for this, because it would be annoying if all these template items were floating around so you could accidentally move them. So that's why they're automatically locked until you unlock them. So that's just how that works. And you can always, if you're unhappy that you actually unlock something, you can always go over to your pages again, the specific page we are on, right click it, and then apply master to pages. Then it actually just gives the properties once again to this page. But that means it locks everything again, but it also deletes the changes you made, just so you know that. I clicked undo. Yeah, I'm not going to show you how to put pictures, and you know that already. So this would be the logo part. So first of all, we have table of content, we have logo, then we have a lot of pages about the logo. I'm not going to insert those. Instead, I'll just make the next page, which will be colors. And I don't know if you write it in English or American. So it's up to you if you write it like this or that. But this is the part about colors, and the part about colors will often also be a huge chunk of the design manual. It will contain the company colors noted in CMYK, noted in RGB, noted in Pantone Colors, noted in hexadecimals, which is colors for HTML homepages. And in some very rare cases, it will also have the company colors noted in RAL, which is spray paint for cars and, paint for furniture and so on. And actually, before I just roll on to the typography section, I will just also tell you how to find these colors in a very easy way. So inside, if I wanted the SMYK value of this orange, if I want the RGB value of this orange, if I want the Pantone value of this orange, I could just take a screenshot of it, because most likely you'll find if you're trying to find out which colors this company is using, sometimes you won't be able to do much else than actually take a screenshot of the color on its homepage, for example. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a screenshot, actually just a screen capture of this specific orange right here. And on Mac, that's Shift Command 4, and I'll be able to just click and drag a photo of that part of the screen. On a PC, you can find the scissor tool in order to be able to cut specific items from the screen and make it a screenshot. So I just took that screenshot, and I'm just going to open up Photoshop and drink some coffee. And inside of Photoshop, I'll just click for it to open the screenshot on my desktop. So this is the orange that I'll be sampling. So how do I find the SMYK values of this? I'll actually just quickly down here type, oh, that's huge text. I'll just set it to be 10 points, actually 8 points. Let's say 8 points. Yes. So smyk, RGB, Pantone, hex. That's actually written like this. And just to be certain you know what I'm talking about, I'll just write HTML. It's normally you know, you just see it like this, a hashtag. That's what we call hex. And there could also be RAL, but that's spray paints and so on. So I'm not gonna include that. That's very rare you see that. Okay, so let's just put it like this. So how do I actually get these values? I'm just gonna click on my color, my eyedropper tool. And while this tool is selected, I'll click once on the orange. I don't know where that sound effect came from, but when I have clicked on this color, you'll notice that it becomes the foreground color. So if I click in here on the foreground color, if I click on foreground color, you'll notice that it will inform me of the RGB values. R is 240, G is 136, B is 51, and so on. And these are actually just the values that I'm actually just going to take a screenshot of this. Because in this area, it shows both RGB, CMYK, and hex values. And those are the values that I'll actually just type in here. And actually, when those values are typed in, I could actually just put this directly into the design manual. So it shows the numbers for each and everything. Okay, if I want the Pantone color is a different way you get that. You go to color libraries. So while the color is still selected, you go to color libraries, and here you'll select a Pantone type, and you'll say, in this case, the most typical one, the ones that you use is Pantone Plus, solid coated or solid uncoated. So in general, if you don't know which color to select from, just which kind of Pantone it's going to use, just choose the one called Pantone Plus Solid Coated. Okay. Pantone Colors is a science in itself. So what happens is the Pantone will select the closest neighbor, you know, the closest color inside of the Pantone color scheme. And it says in this case that this is a Pantone 151C, which means the C is coded. So the C stands for coded. And you can actually also get for metallic paints and so on, know that Pantone is for print. So this is when it's printed in specific colors that is outside the range of the CMYK system. So if you want it to be printed in gold colors, you know, then you would find metallic coated instead. Then you can find gold, silver, you know, whatever you want. Chrome. But this is solid coated is just a regular color scheme where you can find colors that you won't be able to find inside of the regular smyk colors, because smyk can only create around 500,000 different colors, whereas because you only have 3 paint buckets, cyan, magenta, and yellow, whereas Pantone has all the paint buckets you will need. So it's going to be more radiant colors that you can find in the Pantone system, but also it's going to have it's a specific paint bucket you can actually buy for your printer. Well, not for your printer, but in the, you know, the press company which produces the print, they have specific press printers that can create these colors where it's kind of like a paint bucket that uniquely has this specific color. Okay, enough talk about the theory. So this would be what I would type in the Pantone area, Pantone 151C, and then the printing company would know which color that's being used by just typing that info down there. Yeah, so I'm just gonna, then I would type in the correct numbers. In this case, I'm just gonna write something random. It would look something like this, perhaps. Right. So this would be how I would have my design manual look for these different blah 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 things. Oh, that's not a possible number. Yeah, so you get the idea. So back to the design manual. So I could put those color codes in here, and then you'll be able to see, okay, the company uses these color codes for the orange. The company uses these color codes for the gray in the background, and so on, blah blah blah. So, and you'll see that in the design manuals that I've shared, that there's always a section that contains a lot about how these colors look. For example, here in the Aalborg Kommune, you'll notice that there are 9 different colors located here. And in the design manual for Milliken, there is, as I recall, not much about colors, because they actually just use the blue and the black. But in the design manual for UCN, there's too many colors. Here you can see all the color codes for these different colors being used by UCN back in 2015. Okay, cool. The next part, well, inside of the color section, there's also color combinations, which colors can be combined, and color harmonies, which colors look best next to each other. And typically there would be some examples of use, how these colors are being used. The next part would be typography. I'm so fast that I actually change the formatting all the time. Luckily, I've saved it as a paragraph style. In the typography section, we'll of course have all the different typographies the company is using, all the different fonts. It could be it's just one font with different families. It could be several fonts. It depends on the company and how their identity is. Often they will have different typography for online compared to typography for things that's being printed. So remember also if they have differences in which fonts that's being used online compared to print. Also, perhaps there's examples of text, how it's layouted compared to each other. For example, this is probably the most simple layouting of text, but examples of how text should look combined with each other, and perhaps examples of the font hierarchy, which sizes header is compared to subheader, compared to body text, and so on. Yeah, so there could also be examples of which color text typically is in, how much indent there is on the text, special formatting on the text, is it allowed to use bold or italic, and so on. So in general, just rules for how you use your text. Also, there's often examples in design guides where it shows the entire alphabet, so you can see all the letters inside of the font being used. And often you'll realize that the font does not contain, Scandinavian letters if you're Danish. E, Ö, O. If you find free fonts, it will often not contain letters that you use in your own home language. So just that's probably a good idea to research before you actually decide this is the company font. If it does not contain E, Ö, O, and you're a Danish company which wants to write to Danish people in Danish, then it's probably annoying that the font does not contain E, Ö, O. A font containing its entire alphabet in English is typically known as the phrase, "The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog." So if you've heard that before, that actually is just the entire alphabet in English. And that's a way of showing it. A lot of companies just show it by you actually seeing A, B, C, D, E, F, G. I'll just show that inside of some of these manuals. You can see here, this is also a typical way of doing it. A, B, C, D, E, just showing the entire alphabet and possibly also the numbers inside of the font. Yes, so that's typically what's inside of the typography. There's also sometimes examples of use of the text where you see it combined with also next to logo, color, and super graphics. Okay, so after typography, the typical things you have is this section called super graphic or graphic elements. I know that you know this already. So actually some of the stuff that I'm saying right now is just a repetition. So, but we're just showing you, we're just seeing how could we put this into our generic template for the for the for the design manual. Okay, so the super graphic is just, you know, what graphic does the company use other than logo, color, and specific fonts? What other graphic is unique for this company to use? For example, super graphic for a company like Apple is an apple with a which is chewed in, um, whereas a graphic element for Coca-Cola is also that specific bottle, which has kind of like a specific shape, but also Coca-Cola has another graphic, super graphic element, which is Santa. You know, the Santa we know today is actually one that Coca-Cola invented. So there are some specific graphics that's related to the company, and it can actually be graphics on screen, but it can also be, you know, something that's alive, you know, like a mascot. So super graphic, or what we call graphic elements, could be patterns, it could be mascots, it could be secondary elements to the logo, something that's often next to the logo or close to the logo. It could be a simplified version of the logo. Sometimes you see, you know, just a silhouette of a logo, or a very simplified version of the logo, which is used in some specific situations. It could be gradients that the company is using. For example, Aalborg Kommune, they have a large repertoire of gradients that they use all the time. It could be, this section could also contain rules for when and how super graphic is used. It could contain examples where it's being presented next to the logo, text, color, and so on. So the super graphic is actually any graphic or any rules for something the company uses outside of its logo, typography, and colors. So this section could actually contain a lot of different things. The last thing that a company, a design manual typically has, not always, but often, is some kind of ending of the design guide where it shows a lot of examples. In this examples part or extra part, it could be examples of how you lay out something inside of the programs. You know, what templates are being used to make sure that everything looks generic and the same. It could also be, you know, examples of the image style that the company is using. Is it always in red filter, you know, or is it always in sepia? There could be some kind of image theme that there's rules for which themes are can we see in the images that we use to advert ourselves. Is there use some specific filters? Is there some kind of vibe to our images? So rules for how the company uses its images and examples of how it's being used. It could also be examples of different products made according to the visual identity. For example, how to set it up in InDesign or how to present it in front of a customer. So there could be some different examples of product creation, how products are created with the visual identity, but also perhaps examples, mock-ups of how clients should see the visual identity presented. There could be the company paper line inside of example section, which is, let's say, business card, envelope, letterhead, and so on. It could contain company products like the homepage, flyers, posters, and so on. This is all in the PDF that I handed out to you. It could also actually, and I see this often, contain merchandise. If the company is selling merchandise, how does these merchandise items look then? And last but not least, the last thing in a design manual could be some kind of ending. This ending could be, you know, some last words. It could also just be, some design manuals end with nothing, you know, where there's no kind of goodbye or anything. It could contain index. It could contain a literature list. It's very rare that it contains any of those. But some design manuals actually contains an end page. So let's just make that for our design manual. I'll simply just make as page number 7, and I'll just write bye mofo. Sorry. Thank you for listening. But normally most design manuals actually have no ending. It's simply just last page and boom, then there's nothing after that. But Aalborg Kommune, for example, they have a page with their logo on the end page, and it's, yeah. But that's up to you. This was just a short overview of how you could create a design guide inside of InDesign, and what the content should be at the very minimum inside of your design guide. And I think, having said that, that I'll end this recording, and then I'll just take some questions and have a short talk with everyone in the class. So I'll just stop recording now, and that should